What if I told you the greatest gift you ever received was a void, a blank slate, an intentional blindness designed not to punish you, but to save your soul and accelerate your destiny? We stand at the precipice of existence, looking forward, constantly striving, yet utterly ignorant of the millennia of history, etched into the very fabric of our being. We carry the consequences of countless previous lives, the debts, the triumphs, the heartaches, and the grave mistakes, yet we remember none of the actions that created them. This is the profound mystery of the Veil of Forgetfulness, a spiritual mechanism decreed by divine wisdom, and its purpose is not to obscure the truth, but to make your present progress possible. The question is often asked, wouldn't it be simpler, more efficient to remember everything, to recall every error and instantly avoid repeating it? The logic seems impeccable, yet it betrays a deep misunderstanding of the human soul's fragility and the nature of moral regeneration. The philosophy of the spiritual life, illuminated by the greater consciousness of the spiritual realm, reveals that this temporal oblivion is a foundational necessity for the progress of imperfect spirits like ourselves. It is a provision rooted in the infinite mercy of providence, a protective shield guarding the psyche from the colossal weight of its own past. Imagine for a moment the psychological burden of full memory, an exhaustive ledger of all deeds, good and terrible, across 100 incarnations. If we could recall the full register of our past, we would simultaneously remember being the victim and the executioner, the betrayed and the betrayer, the benevolent helper and the merciless tyrant. We would remember the face of every spirit we harmed, every opportunity we wasted, and every commitment we failed to honor across countless centuries. The weight of such moral and existential contradictions would be simply unbearable for the incarnate spirit, shattering the necessary equilibrium for daily life. The soul, still imperfect and heavily influenced by the constraints of matter, would be overwhelmed by a tide of conflicting emotions and identities. To know that the person you despise today was your dearest friend yesterday, or that your most persistent enemy is someone you ruined in a past century, would introduce a confusion so paralyzing that purposeful action would become impossible. The bitterness of ancient betrayals, the terror of forgotten vengeance, and the overwhelming, suffocating sense of historical debt would incapacitate the spirit, making it unable to undertake the simple, singular tasks required for the present expiation. The veil protects us from this crushing complexity, allowing us to focus on the immediate, solvable moral task, the present moment. It grants us psychological peace by compartmentalizing the vast ocean of our history into manageable single-life segments. This deliberate spiritual amnesia is, in its essence, an act of divine mercy, ensuring that the student is only presented with the lesson plan for the current semester and not the entire curriculum of eternity. This mercy acknowledges a crucial fact of our current existence: the limitations imposed by the physical body. The material form, a necessary tool for dense experience and moral friction, severely restricts the spirit's vibratory capacity. We are, while incarnate, fundamentally operating at a lower spiritual frequency. Our mind, tethered to the brain, cannot sustain the unfiltered, total recall of eternity without the immediate onset of debilitating madness. Divine goodness recognizes that to demand a full accounting of the past, while simultaneously limiting our capacity for processing that truth, would be an act of cruelty, not justice. Thus, the veil is an adaptation, a masterful spiritual engineering design that matches the influx of karmic knowledge to the narrow conduit of the human consciousness. The primary objective of incarnation is not merely to exist, but to progress through trial and expiation. Progress is achieved through the free, conscious exercise of virtue, not through forced compliance. If we remembered the exact cause of every current sorrow, the specific act of malice or selfishness that resulted in our present suffering, the expiation would lose its moral merit. If you knew explicitly that your current illness was a direct consequence of your cruelty to an animal in 1642, your acceptance of that illness would be born of necessity and fear of cosmic law, not of genuine submission and repentance. If you knew the demanding colleague was the victim of your ancient greed, your forced tolerance would be an act of transactional payment, not an act of spontaneous, heartfelt charity. The full knowledge would strip away the crucial element of free will in the face of the trial. The struggle would not be a test of virtue, but a simple calculation of cause and effect, where the fear of the known consequence dictates the action. The absence of memory ensures that every trial is faced in good faith and with pure moral intent. We choose patience, forgiveness, and resilience, not because we know the historical reason for the affliction, but because we choose to exercise our highest moral faculties in the face of the unknown. This ignorance elevates the value of the moral effort. It makes the victory over ourselves truly ours, as it is achieved through reason and spiritual effort applied in the present, independent of the blinding passions of the past. It is the very essence of merit. To do good when one does not know the specific historical cost of doing ill. This process is how the essential spiritual qualities, humility, compassion, and true selflessness, are forged. They are not merely adopted as a strategy to settle a debt. They become integrated into the very fiber of the soul, transforming its nature. The veil secures the authenticity of the spiritual change. The profound mercy of the forgetfulness is particularly evident in the realm of interpersonal relations and the necessity of reconciliation. Consider the relationships that define our current lives. Many of these bonds are not coincidental. They are the necessary reconnecting of spirits with whom we have unfinished business, debts to pay, reconciliation to achieve, or love to perfect. The family unit, often a crucible of spiritual testing, frequently comprises spirits who have been deeply intertwined across multiple lives, sometimes as friends, sometimes as bitter foes. If the mother, remembering that the child in her arms once betrayed her, or the husband, knowing his wife was his murderous rival, could recall the exact circumstances of their past grievances, how could reconciliation ever genuinely occur? The seed of resentment, fear, or overwhelming historical prejudice would be constantly present, contaminating the new life. The very purpose of bringing these souls together, to provide a fresh opportunity to mend the rift, to replace hatred with love and injustice with service, would be defeated. The veil forces us to interact with these spirits based solely on their current merit and our current moral disposition, compelling us to use charity and tolerance without the crutch of historical context. We are asked to forgive because it is right, because it is the higher law, not because we are compensating for a known specific wrong. This is the spiritual beauty of the oblivion. It facilitates the necessary process of moral healing and repair between souls, giving the spirit the freedom to rewrite the relationship history with pure, present actions of love and tolerance. It allows for the true spirit of forgiveness, which is the erasure of the wrong from the heart, rather than merely the calculated allowance for a historical necessity. Furthermore, the veil of forgetfulness is essential for the preservation of societal structure and peace in a world still characterized by moral imperfections. If global society were suddenly granted full historical memory, the delicate balance of current relations would instantly shatter. Ancient class struggles, national grievances, and personal vendettas spanning centuries would flare up with the intensity of remembered first-hand injury. No nation could trust another, no neighbor could trust the person next door, knowing the detailed catalogue of their historical crimes. The social experiment of the current civilization would dissolve into chaos, driven by the blinding, unreasoning passions of the past. Divine wisdom, through the veil, ensures that the work of moral progression proceeds gradually and peacefully. It imposes a pause on ancient conflicts, compelling us to resolve them through the lens of present-day civility and law, rather than through the continuous, cyclical violence fueled by historical memory. This protection of the collective sanity is a monumental act of foresight. Each incarnation is a fresh chapter in the book of eternal life. It is not meant to be a mere continuation or replay of the previous chapter. It is a chance to start anew with the acquired intuition and conscience from the past serving as the only guidance. The essence of the past, the moral sense, the understanding of right and wrong, the subtle inclinations toward good, these things remain imprinted on the perispirit, filtering through the new body as innate tendencies, natural talents, or persistent flaws that must be addressed. But the specific events, the names, the dates, the costumes, These are intentionally suppressed. This suppression is vital for ensuring that the spirit is not forever shackled by the past image of itself. To be continually haunted by the image of ourselves as flawed, struggling beings, perhaps even criminal or morally reprehensible, would prevent us from embodying the ideal of what we can be now. The forgetfulness is essential for fostering self-esteem, and the necessary hope required to face a new set of challenges with vigor and a sense of optimism. If we remembered the full extent of our failures, despair would be an almost certainty, crippling the will to act and improve. How could a spirit burdened by the recollection of ancient crimes find the strength to believe in its present capacity for goodness? The veil is therefore a psychological necessity for the sustained effort towards perfection. The ability to look in the mirror and see a clean slate, knowing that the past errors are known only to the Spirit and God, grants us the psychological space to forgive ourselves and strive for genuine transformation. Without this mercy, the crushing weight of past sin would make rehabilitation impossible for many. The memory of past lives is not lost. It is simply temporarily suspended, residing dormant in the spirit's luminous memory, the ledger of its spiritual history. When the spirit sheds the veil of matter and returns to the pleroma, the spiritual home, the veil lifts. The entire chain of existences, stretching back through the ages, unfolds before the spirit like an open scroll. It is at this stage, in the full clarity and elevated perspective of the spirit world, that the soul comprehends the magnificent justice and perfect coherence of God's laws. The spirit recognizes that the very trials faced in the life just ended were self-chosen before incarnation, undertaken willingly to pay old debts or accelerate progress. The suffering is understood not as arbitrary punishment, but as a pedagogical tool, the necessary consequence of free will exercised poorly in the past. It is this moment of post-incarnation revelation that proves the divine justice. The Spirit confirms that the law of cause and effect is impartial, and that their expiation was chosen by their own will, thus removing all possible grounds for complaint or rebellion against the divine order. If this memory were granted to the incarnate being, the knowledge that the trial was self-chosen would undermine the intensity of the lesson itself. The spirit must experience the consequence of their actions without the immediate comfort of knowing why, thus strengthening their resolve and deepening their empathy for others undergoing similar, unknown struggles. The law requires the effect to be experienced in its true psychological intensity. Furthermore, the veil is an essential element in managing the inequality of human conditions. If we, the rich, knew we were once the poor whom we now oppress, or if we, the powerful, knew we were once the slaves we now command, the system of hierarchy and control would collapse instantly, perhaps violently, long before the individuals involved had morally reformed themselves. The veil of forgetfulness allows the play of social interaction to proceed, giving the rich the opportunity to develop charity and humility without the compulsion of historical debt, and giving the poor the opportunity to develop patience and resignation without the resentment of knowing the precise historical injustice. It places all spirits, regardless of their current social standing, on an equal moral footing, judged only by their actions in the present life. Ultimately, the veil of forgetfulness is one of the most sublime proofs of divine providence and infinite love. It is the wisdom that recognizes our immaturity, our inability to handle the colossal truth of our history without immediate collapse. It is the tool that ensures that every moment of merit, every act of self-improvement, and every instance of patience and forgiveness is truly earned and truly pure. It is the mechanism that cleans the slate for new relationships, permitting the bitterest adversaries of the past to become the closest allies of the present. We are asked to live a life of virtue based on conscience and intuition, not based on a detailed ledger of historical cosmic accounting. We forget who we were so that we may fully concentrate on who we are intended to become, to realize the highest moral potential of this new existence. We forget the details of the disease so that we may focus all our energy on the cure. This temporary oblivion is the guarantee of our moral freedom, the foundation of our present effort, and the silent protector of our sanity, as we journey toward the ultimate, fully conscious reunion with the divine source. The compassion of the Creator is shown in this restraint, in the gentle metering of truth. It is the gentle hand of the shepherd, guiding the soul back to the path without the use of chains or force. The knowledge of the past will return fully when the spirit is strong enough, when its perispirit is sufficiently etherealized, and its moral compass so finely tuned that it can absorb the totality of its history without falling into the abyss of despair or the vanity of pride. When the spirit has matured to a point where historical knowledge no longer contaminates the purity of its present motive, the veil will lift naturally, no longer needed as a protective mechanism. Until then, we must embrace this grand and merciful ignorance, understanding it as the indispensable condition for our evolutionary progress, the very mechanism that allows the unfinished business of the past to be rectified by the pure, free will of the present. The veil is not a denial of truth, but a deferral, granted in the name of love and sustained moral effort. If you love this story and want to hear more like it, please hit that subscribe button. It truly means the world to us and helps us grow. And hey, while you're at it, let's aim for 50 likes on this video. Help us smash that goal.